The beginning of this month marked 26 years since the ceremonial handing over of Hong Kong to China after 156 years of British rule in the former colony. The 1984 Sino-British Joint Declaration clearly set out the protective principle of one country, two systems, which was meant to last for 50 years, ensuring that Hong Kong's system of governance would be maintained. For the first 20 years, all went reasonably well, and the Joint Declaration was broadly upheld. But then, the Chinese Communist Party began to disregard Hong Kong's traditions of freedom and liberty, and soon popular uprisings sprung up in fierce opposition. In 2019, as the Hong Kong government did the CCP's bidding in passing a controversial extradition law and then imposed a draconian national security law, the following year, fierce insurgencies erupted and nearly led to urban warfare between protesters and Hong Kong police. Fin Lau, my next guest, founded two pro-democracy groups in Hong Kong and was subsequently arrested. He came into exile in the United Kingdom to continue his activism, but it was only the other day when the Hong Kong government issued a bounty of $1 million Hong Kong dollars for his capture. That's about £100,000. Now, Mr. Fin Lau joins me this evening. Fin, thank you so much for coming in. So there's a bounty on your head of $1 million Hong Kong dollars. What is the effect of that? How does that affect your daily life?
Well, I've been quite cautious since I got the first so-called arrest warrant since 2020 under the same draconian national security law in Hong Kong. But then after getting the first explicit $1 million Hong Kong dollar bounty, I have been even more cautious. I keep looking around whether someone may follow me. After all, I got attacked in the UK 3 years ago.
But tell me about that. You were attacked and beaten almost to death 3 years ago in England.
Yes, it was during the first lockdown period. And I was having my daily walk near my house, just 3 minutes away. And then I just suspect that there were three guys trying to follow me. Once I stopped by a lamppost, they simply punched my right eye. So they keep punching and kicking my head. And I don't know how long I've passed out. I thought I lost my right eye immediately. And then I was so fortunate to wake up and then to stand again. And then the doctor and nurses, they spent around 5 to 6 hours to treat my injuries. I also got concussion and other kinds of injuries as well.
And this happened in broad daylight in England. Were you robbed? Was it a mugging? Was there any evidence that it was from the Chinese Communist Party?
Well, there's no direct evidence, but there are some kind of circumstantial evidence because they didn't say anything racist. They didn't take any of my personal belongings. And it happened 2 months before I got my first arrest warrant from Hong Kong authorities.
And in Hong Kong, you were promoting democracy, which was something allowed for under the Joint Declaration. And initially, there'd been a lot of confidence in the Joint Declaration, hadn't there? And China had behaved well and had maintained Hong Kong's freedoms. What went wrong?
Well, I would say that maybe for the first few years, it went well. But in the end, all kind of autonomy, civil liberties, rule of law, etc., was being eroded in Hong Kong bit by bit. And then everything accelerated since the rise of Xi Jinping in China, in Beijing.
Because Deng Xiaoping made a very interesting point when the Joint Declaration was signed for 50 years. He said he hoped that China would be able to catch up with Hong Kong, and now it seems that that's all been forgotten about. Yeah. And do you think it shows you something important about the direction of the Chinese government currently, that it's become more totalitarian than it had been under Deng, not just in Hong Kong, but in China itself?
Yes. So Hong Kongers, I would say, we are not the only victims. We also got Tibetans. We also got Uyghurs, and Taiwan is maybe the next one. So they try to promote the idea of one country, two systems towards Taiwanese, but in the end, we know that is a failure. So, that's why I would say that perhaps the 1984 Sino-British Joint Declaration is a diplomatic mistake.
And the Sino-Anglo Joint Declaration is meant to be an international agreement, but China now says it's none of your business, this is our domestic affairs, and tells the United Kingdom government just to shut up. And it's quite aggressive about that. Yes. What do you think the British government can and ought to do in response?
Well, in my memory, in 2015, it was the first time that the UK government declared a breach of the treaty by the PRC, by China. in the end, and then in 2019, 2020, then more and more declaration by the UK government. And then I think that there should be some kind of concrete action, for example, maybe targeted sanctions against Hong Kong senior officials. This is the least thing that we should do in terms of the violation of the treaty.
And what about businesses that are operating in Hong Kong, particularly HSBC, which seems to be not unsympathetic to the Chinese government? This is quite surprising for a UK business, isn't it?
Yeah, but I think the HSBC is leaning towards China more and more, especially after the promulgation of the Dracula NSL. And right now, I don't think that they're facing certain pressure or enough pressure from the UK side. So that's why all of those Hong Kong pension, most of them has been locked up in Hong Kong.
And so the UK government, in your view, should have targeted sanctions on individual members of the Chinese government. We should obviously try and work with the United States so that they would do it too, because that would have greater global impact. What more can we do to help people like you, the citizens of Hong Kong, who are standing up for democracy?
Well, I would say there are at least two things. First of all, we are grateful for the introduction of the British National Overseas Visa Scheme that helps thousands of people flee Hong Kong to continue to fight for freedom. And then on the other hand, I would say that perhaps we should think about maybe expanding the scheme, or perhaps try to accelerate the approval of different political asylum seekers from Hong Kong. So that's something that we may consider.
Well, it's such an important point because of all the colonies that the United Kingdom had, Hong Kong was the only one that we handed over to a totalitarian regime rather than allowing independence. And therefore, I've always thought we have a particular duty to the British nationals overseas in Hong Kong, who, up until 1981, were full British citizens, and it's just restoring that status to them.
Yeah, and going back to the 1980s, I would say that if there was a referendum before, well, maybe having the negotiation with Beijing, then perhaps the outcome would be different. At least the UK government may have a higher bargaining power towards Hong Kong future. But in the end, we didn't do that. As I would say that paved the way for the 1997 Hong Kong handover tragedy.
And in Hong Kong, there are still hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people supporting you, that we saw that when the people of Hong Kong took to the streets.
Yes, actually, back in 2019, we got more than 2 million people protesting on the street. But after the COVID, after the promulgation of the NSL, we couldn't see that anymore on the street of Hong Kong. But still, we got millions of Hong Kong try to fight.
Finn, thank you so much for joining me. I hugely admire your courage, and I hope that you will be kept safe in the United Kingdom.